Our next lesson is lesson 72, factoring trinomials. The general or standard form for a trinomial is x squared plus bx plus c. And the first step that we need to take in factoring a trinomial is to make sure that it is arranged in the correct order. Notice that the square term is first, the linear term or the term raised to the first power is second, and the constant term is third. But the square term, there will always be a square term first here before we factor, and then the linear term, and then the constant term. And the second thing we do is we look at the sign, whether the plus or minus of the c. So let's look at an example here. Okay, so this trinomial is in fact arranged correctly. We have the x squared term first, the x term second, and the constant term third. Okay, so we need to factor. We look at the sign here of the constant term. It's positive. That means that we're going to get what we're going to factor into are two binomials. So our first factor is going to be x, or our first term in our factors are going to be x, because when we multiply the first binomial times the second binomial, we use a process called FOIL, which first times first will give us the x squared term. So, and now we look at this sign, the sign of the constant term, it's plus, so that makes us believe and makes us know that both these signs will be positive, because when we do last times last, positive times a positive is in fact a positive. And now we look for factors of 18 whose sum is 9. So what are the factors of 18 whose sum is 9? Well, all the factors of 18, there's 1 times 18. Well, their sum is not 9. There's 2 times 9. Their sum is not 9. There's 3 times 6. And their sum is in fact 9. So we put a 6 here and a 3 here. It doesn't matter. We could put the 3 here and the 6 there. Okay, so now we have factored this trinomial into two binomials. If we multiplied this out by 4, we would in fact get this trinomial. Let's do that just on this one, for example. First times first would be x times x would be x squared. Outer times outer would be 3x. Inner times inner would be 6x. And last times last would be plus 18. And we can add our outer and inner terms and get 9x. So x squared plus 9x plus 18 is our product. So our answer, in fact, would be these two factors. Okay, here's one. Okay, so let's factor. Let's factor x. Look at this sign. It's positive. Now, I didn't mention on the first example that if this sign is positive, then we have to look at this sign. Let's look back at that. If this sign is positive, then we have to look at this sign. If this is positive, we have to look at this sign. If this sign is positive, if this sign is positive and this sign is positive, both these signs will be positive. If this sign is positive and this sign is negative, then both these signs will be negative, because a negative times a negative is in fact a positive. And now we look for factors of 4 whose sum again is 5. Okay, so we have 1 times 4. Well, their sum is 5, so we put a 1 and a 4. So there are our factors, binomial factors of that trinomial. If we multiplied this out by 4, we would in fact get x squared minus 5x plus 4. Okay, next one. We factor x. Next, look at this sign. This sign is negative. Now, if it's negative, we don't have to look at this sign yet. If it's negative, if this sign, if the sign of the constant term is negative, then one of the signs will be positive and the other will be negative. And now we look for factors of 10 whose not sum is 3, but whose difference is 3. So here we come over here, 1 times 10, their difference is 9, so that's not it. 2 times 5, their difference is 3. And now we look at this sign, it's positive. Now we look at this sign, it's positive. So our larger of the two factors of 10 is the positive one. 5 and 2. If we multiplied this out using FOIL, let's go ahead and do that. We'd get x squared. First times first is x squared. Outer times outer would be minus 2x. Inner times inner would be plus 5x. And last times last would be minus 10. The outer and inner terms would add together and make 3x. And in fact, that's what we had to begin with. Plus 3x minus 10. And that was our original trinomial. Okay, one more. Okay, let's look here. We've got a factor and a factor. X and x. Look at this sign, it's minus. That tells us 1 is plus, 1 is minus. Now we look for factors of 8 whose difference is 7. Well, there's 1 times 8. Well, their difference is 7. Now we look at this sign, it's negative, so the larger of our two factors is the negative. So 8 and 1. If we multiply this out using FOIL, we would in fact get x squared minus 7x minus 8. Okay, here's one that's a little bit different, but we use sort of the same procedures. Okay, so we'll factor this. Okay, x and x. We look at this sign, it's positive. We look at this sign, it's positive, so both the signs will be positive. And now we start to look for factors of 6y squared. Well, that could be y times 6y. But we're looking for factors whose sum is in fact 5, and it's not a 5 here. Okay, so we come on down. We got 2y times 3y. Well, the sum of 2 and 3 is in fact 5. So let's put those in here, 2y and 3y, and let's try that. Make sure that's right. We're using FOIL. First times first is x squared. Outer times outer is plus 3xy. Inner times inner is plus 2xy. And then last times last is plus 6y squared. Our outer and inner terms will add together, make 5xy, and that would be our original trinomial. So these would in fact be our factors of that trinomial right there. Okay, let's evaluate some trinomials. Evaluate x squared plus 5x minus 14 and its factors for x equal 3. Well, there's really two ways to do this. You can just evaluate the trinomial at x equal 3. Okay, so we could do that. We put in 3 for x. So everywhere I have a variable, I put a set of parentheses. 3 goes in here, plus 5. 3 goes in here, minus 14. 3 squared is 9, plus 15, minus 14. Well, let's see, 15 minus 14 would be 1, and 1 plus 9 would be 10. So that should be our answer, but let's factor this trinomial and see if we get the same thing. Okay, let's factor it. X and x. We look at this sign, it's negative. That tells us that one sign is positive, one is negative. And now we look for factors of 14 whose difference is 5. Okay, so we try 1 and 14. Their difference is 13, so that's not it. We try 2 and 7. Their difference is 5. Wow, that's it. Now we look at the sign here of the linear term. It's positive, so our larger factor is 7, is the plus one. And that should be our factors. And now we could put 3 in here. So 3 plus 7 times 3 minus 1, or 3 minus 2, I'm sorry. And that would be 10 times 3 minus 2 is 1, and 10 times 1 is in fact 10. So we got the same answer. Either way we did that. Okay, so here's your homework. Here's your homework assignment. Lesson 72, 4 through 10, 17, 19, 21, 23. There should be a comma right here. Let's put us a little comma in there. Comma. And then 28 through 30. But would like for you to work number 4 and number 5 and email me the answers tonight. And then I would also suggest that you work probably 5 or 6 additional problems and then we'll finish the rest of the problems in class tomorrow.